Jaleel Ahmad White, born November 27, 1976.
A lot of people know me as a normal guy, normal cat. I don't think it'll be much of a shock at all.
He played one of the most iconic characters in television history, and somehow that became the worst thing that ever happened to his career. Jaleel White didn't just play Steve Urkel, he was Steve Urkel to millions of households every Friday night in the 90s. But what began as a guest appearance meant for one episode became a cultural phenomenon that grew too big for its own creator. The suspenders, the glasses, the voice, all of it turned him into a living cartoon, and no matter what he did, audiences couldn't unsee it. Hollywood didn't want Jaleel White the actor, they wanted Urkel the character. And when a role becomes that iconic, breaking free from it can feel impossible. This is the Curse of Steve Urkel. Jaleel White is an actor born in Culver City, California. He began appearing in television commercials at the age of 3 and logged guest roles throughout the 1980s. His breakout moment came in 1989 when he was cast as Steve Urkel on Family Matters. White was a natural to say the least. The role was originally conceived as a one-time guest appearance, but the character struck a chord with audiences and White became a series regular. At 12 years old, Jaleel went from supporting guest to the face of one of television's biggest sitcoms. He became the household name behind the glasses, the suspenders, and the nerdy laugh, turning Urkel into a pop culture phenomenon. But with that success came a cost. As the character grew, the actor behind it began to disappear. Hollywood had Jaleel White the actor on its roster, but it also had Steve Urkel the character. And escaping a role that defined you so completely would turn out to be harder than playing it. Stunt number 1, trapped inside a character. When a role becomes bigger than the actor, there's rarely a way out. For Jaleel White, that moment came the second audiences fell in love with Steve Urkel. What started as a one-episode guest appearance turned into a decade-long identity that Hollywood refused to separate from the man who played it. Every producer, every casting call, every late-night appearance, all they wanted was the glasses, the suspenders, and that high-pitched voice. He could deliver a dramatic performance, a serious line, and a brand new character, and it wouldn't matter. To everyone watching, he was Urkel pretending to be someone else. The fame was powerful, but it offered no freedom. Even after Family Matters ended, Jaleel couldn't land roles that saw him beyond that image. Casting directors didn't see potential, they saw nostalgia. Studios feared audiences wouldn't accept him outside of the role that made him famous. And the longer he waited for the industry to move on, the deeper the shadow grew. Urkel had become immortal, and Jaleel White was left living in his reflection, successful, beloved, and yet somehow forgotten. What began as a blessing eventually became the thing that stunted everything else. Stunt number 2, Hollywood never let him go. When Family Matters ended, Jaleel White expected a clean slate. He had spent almost his entire childhood building a resume inside one role and wanted to prove there was more to him than the nerdy act and the catchphrase. But Hollywood didn't see potential, it saw risk. Networks hesitated to cast him in mature parts because audiences still pictured that awkward kid from TGIF. Even when he nailed an audition, studio executives feared viewers would laugh at the memory of Urkel instead of believing the character on screen. The scripts that did come through the door often played on irony. What if Urkel grew up? And White refused them all, unwilling to parody himself. He tried sitcom pilots, independent dramas, and voiceover work, but the industry's nostalgia was stronger than his ambition. In meetings, casting directors couldn't stop smiling. They weren't listening to the performance, they were reminiscing. Hollywood had celebrated Jaleel White for a decade, then quietly labeled him a relic. And while his peers transitioned into producers, directors, and household names, he was left watching doors close that once swung open at the sound of a laugh track. Stunt number 3, the character that wouldn't die. As the years passed, Jaleel White began to understand that Steve Urkel would never truly go away. In interviews, he admitted that for a long time he resented the character that made him famous. He hated the way people still shouted the catchphrase when they saw him in public or laughed before he ever spoke. For Jaleel, it wasn't nostalgia, it was a reminder of the creative space he lost. But time has a way of changing perspective. As the internet rediscovered Family Matters through streaming and memes, the world that once typecast him began to celebrate him again. Instead of running from Urkel, Jaleel started leaning in. He appeared in commercials, sitcom cameos, and even created projects that referenced his TV alter ego. It was part self-acceptance, part survival. But no matter how many times he reinvented himself, the reminder followed close behind. His legacy rested on a version of himself that belonged to the past. The glasses that once made him famous also kept him invisible. In Hollywood, reinvention decides everything, and for Jaleel White, the world never stopped asking for the one version he couldn't keep playing forever. All in all, Jaleel White's story is one of talent both rewarded and restricted. He reached a level of cultural impact most actors never touch, yet the same success quietly boxed him in. For every door Urkel opened, another slammed shut. Still, few actors could handle that weight and keep moving. White never quit the industry, he adapted to it. He found ways to laugh at what once hurt him, staying working, and built a life that wasn't dependent on chasing fame. For that reason alone, he deserves more credit than he ever gets. The truth is, being remembered too well can sometimes be worse than being forgotten. And for Jaleel White, that's the real curse of Steve Urkel. He created a character so timeless, it refused to grow old, even when the man who played him had to. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.